So that's about 30 miles by the crow flies, and a bit longer on foot. So soldiers would have to march all the way from here at Fort Snelling up to Anoka, where they had a little encampment. They'd spend a few weeks gathering firewood and bring all the wood back here. To give you an idea how much firewood they go through in 1 year, take the parade ground. They wouldn't store it inside the fort here, but take the parade ground, which is behind me, and cover it in about 7 feet of wood. And that's 1 year. And that's with rationing. And the Army did have years where they were short on firewood because they were cutting low quality wood or just didn't cut enough. So there's cold soldiers. That being said, keep in mind it takes a year to season firewood. So if you want your firewood, the firewood you're burning this winter to cook and clean and heat was the firewood you cut last winter. So they were doing this even in the middle of the blizzards, even in the middle of inclement weather. They would be marching, gathering firewood because they knew they wanted to be warm next winter. Now, the last thing they also had to do was food. Who likes food? Most of us generally like a niblet every now and then. That being said, the Army knew that this was the end of the supply chain. This is as far west as the Army went during this period of the 1820s. In order to get supplies, the nearest city where they could place large contracts was St. Louis, Missouri, which was just a bit over a month away by boat. Keep in mind, this is an era before planes, trains, and automobiles, and really even good roads. So to get here, the only way was by boat, up the Mississippi. And when you think of it, the Mississippi, most people think, oh, it's a very placid river, there's not much going on, it's pretty calm and flat. That's because the Army Corps of Engineers has spent the last 200 years taming it. 200 years ago, the river had rapids, it had snags, it was a lot faster flowing because there was no check dams on it. So it was a bit more of a harrowing journey, and this is an era before even steamboats. So to get here, they would use, they'd row the boats if it was too deep, they'd use sails if they could, and other times they would pull the barge. So they'd literally just have guys with poles pushing against the river bottom, against the current, and centipeding their way up the river. It could take up to a month to get here. So the Army quickly discovered, or quickly figured out, that every pound of food you grow is a pound of food we don't ship. So soldiers also had to maintain several hundred acres of land outside the fort as gardens to supplement their rations, and they also maintained fields as well. The gardens were there because the food here was pretty boring. It was usually your pound of bread, your half pound of salted meat, and then usually some form of dried peas or beans, which, after you've had that for about 2 weeks in a row, it gets pretty boring. So by virtue of you having your own garden, you can supplement some of that and add some variety to the diet. Keep things a bit interesting. So soldiers here at the fort were trained as what's known as line infantry. Line infantry is, of course, you've probably seen the popular depictions of soldiers marching shoulder to shoulder straight forward towards another formation doing the same. They stop and they start firing at each other. I'm going to let the plane go by. Thank you, Delta. To our modern sensibilities, we think, why would they do that? That doesn't seem right. Why would you just walk towards someone shooting at you? A lot of that had to do with the technology of the period. The U.S. Army of the period used this. This is a smoothbore Flintlock musket. Particularly, this is a Harper's Ferry model of 1816. 1816 being the year they started manufacturing them, Harper's Ferry being the arsenal they started making them in what's today West Virginia. So, what all this means, smoothbore Flintlock, this is a flintlock. There is a piece of flint held in the jaw. When I pull the trigger, that flies forward and hits this piece of steel, which creates a shower of sparks onto a pan of powder. That pan explodes, and a small amount of that explosion goes through a touch hole, touches off the main charge, and propels the bullet out the barrel. So what does smoothbore mean? Smoothbore means there's no rifling. It's just a tube. Rifling is a series of grooves in the barrel that make the bullet spin. However, this does not have that. The reason is that slows down your ability to load. A soldier armed with a rifle could shoot maybe 1 round a minute. The reason is, to get the rifling to engage or make the bullet spin, you have to have the bullet be the same size as the barrel. So you basically have to hammer the bullet all the way down to the breech, which takes time. And these muskets are notoriously filthy. The more you shoot, the harder it is to reload. So a soldier armed with a rifle who could maybe get a shot off a minute, pretty quick in combat, he's shooting once every minute and a half, every 2 minutes. So a soldier armed with a musket could fire as fast as 3 rounds per minute. So the Army chose rapid fire generalists over specialists. The infantry here also manned the artillery. The Army did maintain specific regiments of artillery. However, they were left on the East Coast to man the coastal fortifications in case the Europeans decided they wanted to come for a visit, the armed variety. So, that being said, that also led to the tactics of line infantry. These were not accurate. They could maybe hit a soldier or a target you were aiming at maybe at 50 yards. Beyond that, you kind of got lucky. They kind of just had enough and then they just started going in their own direction. So that's why you'd fire a volley. The idea was by leveling or having a company or a battalion fire as one, it would create a wall of lead that would fly towards the target and would hit, instead of just 1 or 2 soldiers going down, it'd be 5, 6, 7, 8. So the idea was it would slowly wear away their morale so that they would be more inclined to retreat later on or break, again, in the face of when you advanced again. So, excuse me, the other thing is cavalry. Cavalry are just soldiers on horseback. Soldiers who are dispersed in more modern tactics could not fire fast enough to disperse a cavalry charge. If you had cavalry charging at you, these weapons would not allow you to drown the cavalry in bullets like modern weapons could. So the cavalry would reach you, and at that point, you'd probably have to use this. So this is the bayonet. Just turns this into a basically giant spear. Horses, however, are, in some cases, smarter than humans and have a very strong self-preservationist instinct. So humans standing shoulder to shoulder close to the ranks, seeing cavalry, they can level their bayonets like so, and horses will see this and say, that's going to hurt, I'm going to go somewhere else. So you have your front rank standing like this, chest height, the second rank behind them, like so, and the idea is that well-disciplined infantry will stay close together, so cavalry will not run them down. There was such a thing as light infantry tactics, which we think of as more modern tactics, disperse, taking cover, shooting at will, but the reason why the army taught that but didn't use it for most of its soldiers was cavalry would just run right over you, and formed infantry could advance right over you as well. So that's the reason why they did this. That's the reason